Hello, my name is Philip Sheldrake and this is Stephen Waddington.
Hello.
And you're watching CIPR TV, brought to you by the CIPR and Marketers 4DC. Our guest in the studio is Robert Phillips, the CEO of Edelman UK. So welcome to Robert. We'll get to Robert in just a moment, but we've just got some other news for you first. If you want to get involved and ask Robert a question or comment on anything we're covering in today's show, please use the comment box at the bottom of your screen or tweet with the hashtag #CIPR TV.
Before we talk to Robert, we wanted to review a couple of stories from the last week or so. The big one from last week is PR agency Mission and Nokia, who ended up on the wrong side of Leeds-based blogger Bangs and a Bun. She published a blog about how she felt most treated by Mission in its efforts to engage with her on behalf of its client Nokia as she prepared for a half marathon. Now, both Mission and Nokia have apologised unequivocally and learnt from the experience. But here I think is a great example of how PR professionals shouldn't be working with bloggers, don't you think?
Well, it's funny, actually, we've just had our very first contribution in live from Soyini Gray, who has asked exactly that question. So this has obviously ruffled some feathers this week. I think it's probably not so much a case of Mission PR not knowing the difference between how to treat bloggers from journalists or any other stakeholder, but it's obviously just been a failure in workflow and it's fallen between the cracks. They could have got in a little bit quicker with the Games Up Gov, I'm sorry, but they got there somewhere in around about comment number 52 on Bangs and a Bun, but good on them. And I guess they won't do it again.
It's a lesson learned.
And last week we saw the Greater Manchester Police launch a Twitter campaign that saw it tweet incidents over a 24 hours period. The campaign was conceived by Paul Fabretti at Manchester-based social media agency Gabba. And I think it was an excellent example of a public service organisation engaging with its audience via social media. Did you see it?
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. I mean, we've all got a view on the visibility of the police on the street. We've all got a view that we think we should be seeing more of them, but actually what we learned from this experience when the police police force demonstrated to us exactly how it was spending its time and calls on its time was that, you know, there's a lot of absolutely irrelevant nonsense being asked.
Yeah.
There's a lot of effectively work that should be falling to social agencies that falls on the police's doorstep. And actually, the amount of time left for policing means that there's little wonder that people make complaints about service levels. I think we're going to see lots more of it, and it's a great example of a public sector organisation engaging directly with its audience and showing where it's creating value.
Well, that sounds like a perfect segue to introduce our guest today.
Talk to Robert. So, to Robert. Robert's a frequent writer and contributor on the relationships between businesses, brands, governments and citizens. He's the co-author of Citizen Renaissance. He's got a 25-year career in PR, including co-founding consumer brands boutique Jackie Cooper PR in 1987, a business that was subsequently sold to Edelman. Jackie Cooper to Edelman with Wonderbra and PlayStation along the way. It's a hell of a career, right?
Yeah, I'm still very passionate about what PR can achieve and should achieve as an industry.
So we're at a pivotal moment, you were just saying just before we came live. What's pivotal? What's happening? Why has 2010 been such an incredible year?
I think it's been an incredible 2 or 3 years for PR. I think a number of us in the industry have argued for a while now that PR has the possibility, the potential, not only to be the ascendant discipline within the whole marketing and communications mix, but also to be quite a transformative force for good generally. And I think that's where my two worlds sort of collide, in terms of the ascendancy of PR, and at Edelman we call it public engagement, but the evolution of public relations into public engagement is part of this inflection point. And then through my sort of personal writings on Citizen Renaissance, it's about the power of communications to be a transformative force for good. Why is it an inflection point? Because we now live in a conversational economy, and no discipline knows the conversation and can work the conversation better and harder than PR professionals.
So the ad agency's dead?
I think the ad agency will never die, but I think the ad agency is in need of urgent and radical reform.
Because you're obviously as strong an advocate for public relations as you might be said to be a detractor of paid-for media. We've just started to see advertising consultancies begin fledgling public relations operations. What's your take on that?
Well, I think there are two answers or two parts to answer that question. I think the model that we're currently seeing emerging is the paid model, which has traditionally been occupied by advertising, whether that could be short form content or short form film in any guise. Then of course there's the owned media channel, which we're seeing through the rise of applications or Facebook fan pages or similar, and that shows that every company has the right to be a media company in its own right. And then we have the earned media space, the social and earned media space, which is sort of where PR has traditionally operated, but then PR itself has to reform as well. So, I think that the old advertising industry, the old model, if it's looking to use old forms of PR, won't necessarily understand quite how the content that it creates needs to be truly social, and the way that it creates it needs to be socialized. So it's that socialized thing that I think gives the big challenge for the ad industry.
It does remind me of a conversation you had in recent times on radio and television with Lord Tim Bell. It became a bit of a
spat.
An infamous discussion for several reasons. I wondered if you could walk people through who might not have followed that particular foray.
Well, there are a number of issues that Tim and I seem to disagree on. I sort of took some offence at his dismissal of the sort of digital age as sort of, I think, call it Twitter twatter or something.
Yes, that's the polite way of pronouncing it,
absolutely.
I believe.
And the point that I've always made, and I think is really important, is that people tend to confuse digital as either being about the technology or about the channel, but actually it's about the behaviour change that it's driven. And so it's not a question of coming out with a campaign on Twitter or a campaign for Twitter, it's about coming out with a campaign that can be properly socialised. So that was one point of disagreement. Another point of disagreement was basically that I think he was just dismissing this as sort of jargon about this whole sort of inflection moment, inflection point for the transformation of communications as being jargon. And I think it's not jargon, it's real. And the third point of disagreement was actually on the agency model itself. Obviously Edelman is a family-owned independent company despite our size, and we're very proud of it. But that gives us a huge degree of flexibility that we can, I think, advocate on behalf of clients in any of those channels, paid, owned or earned. Whereas the traditional network-owned agency models tend to sort of demand that the client buys a strategy once, twice, 3 times over, and that agencies are confined to their silos. And Tim and I had a pretty profound disagreement on that also.
We've got a question from Joanna Day, something I know you'll have a view on. Future of the media evolves into the digital age. Are PRs going to be able to make the shift from media consumers into online media collaborators? I know Edelman's been, you put digital firmly at the heart of your business 3-4 years ago. Yeah. Is the rest of the industry going to be able to carry out that pace? I think it's a great question, and I go back to what I said earlier. I think that if we see digital as a channel rather than as a behaviour, then I think we will get it wrong. I think that we have to understand the new rules of the road, which is about openness, which is about collaboration, I think is a great point, which is about transparency, which is about understanding that in any communications equation we have to look at all the stakeholders and not just at a singular stakeholder. So I think that PR absolutely, in a way, is in the best place to evolve and adapt, but I think it still has to evolve and adapt. It's just sort of slightly higher up the food chain. Is actually here this a debate about the future of the media? Is media as a construct relevant anymore?
I think the media is relevant, but again, I think it's changing shape rapidly. The business model argument in terms of failed business models or failing business models or challenging business models clearly taking place. Interesting, at Edelman, as you may or may not know, Richard Sambrook recently joined us as Global Content Director from the BBC, where he was Global Head of News. Stefan Stearns joined us from the FT. Now, what we're not doing is just asking them to come and be PR people. They're part of what we're trying to achieve because there's a different approach to content. There's a different approach to socialising information. There's a different approach to shaping that information and sharing it. And so the point about us becoming collaborative, one thing is quite clear to me, that the age of spin is dead.
Let me just remind people who might be watching at the moment, do tweet away to your heart's content with the hashtag #CIPR TV so that we can pick up your comments and integrate them into the remainder of the show. But now I think it's probably a good time to talk about the elephant in the room. Today, public sector cuts, probably as we're sitting here right now being announced.
Yeah.
What's your take? What's Edelman's exposure to the public sector?
Well, in some ways, Edelman has had quite a lucky recession. In round one, we were not overexposed in financial services or automotive, which took a fair brunt of the pain, and actually less than 2% of our business is in the pure public sector. So we're not directly exposed. I think my concern is more about what it will do to confidence generally, to business confidence and to consumer confidence, and I'm not sure really we know the answer to that. Certainly the business is very robust, and we grew quite healthily in the first year of recession and slightly in the second year of recession. The prospects of this year are very strong, but I do worry that there is going to be something of a dip, if not economically, certainly in terms of confidence. And I think the big question is, are these cuts properly economic? In which case, if someone's got their sums right, it's fine, or are they ideological, in which case there may be worries ahead.
It's obviously not good news for people who work in the public sector or people who work in organisations who have a greater exposure to public sector revenue than you've just said that your own company does. But it seems to me that if we look at as the profession at the moment, we have public relations and marketing, and the two are usually treated as quite separate, although there's no overarching budget. It seems to me that traditionally 80% has gone on marketing, 20% is public relations. And it seems that if we have for every 10% cut in public sector revenue, we only just need to nip 2 or 3 points back in the overall budget to maintain that status quo. And if you're saying that the moment is now for public relations and the advertising guys are on the back foot wondering how it's all changed, that optimism, you might share that optimism.
I think that analysis is 100% right, and I think it extends beyond the public sector. I think that's been the case for businesses and brands over the past 2 to 3 years. We've been increasing our share of the pie, and therefore that has mitigated any costs that we've had or cuts that we've had in budget. We're taking different budget from different places, and that also speaks to my sort of convergent agency model that I referenced earlier. That said, if the sums are to be believed, the government today has taken 490,000 people out of work over the next 4 years. Budgets have been cut by departmental budgets by 19%. These are deep, and these are significant, and it is bound to have an economic effect. By the way, if I'm working with arts and culture organisations, that too is going to change. I think one thing that we will see as a result of this is more collaboration, to your questioner's point, between the public and the private sector, because those departments, if you're in issues of health, in issues of internet security, for example, in issues of business development and enterprise, I think government is going to have to find a better way of working with business than it has done in the past, for government to be less suspicious of business and for citizens to be less suspicious of that partnership or those partnerships, to find funding to do some of the important sort of heavy lifting that government alone was doing previously.
Of course, when you talk about finding funding needs justification, and we have this age-old question about return on investment for public relations.
Here's a question from David Phillips that touches on some of the points we've already covered. Modernisation in the industry. We need to embrace planning. We need to embrace measurement. How the hell are we going to fund it?
As an industry?
As an industry.
Yeah.
Big changes to the industry.
Well, I think some of the work that we're doing at Edelman is and this was sort of codified also by the Barcelona summit. PR has its own summit, fantastic.
What did you make of the output?
Well, I think broadly speaking the outputs are right. I think we have to move from a system where we measure media, which is, look, we do a very successful job at what you ask us to do.
At best, it's a proxy. Right?
Yeah, exactly, to measuring outcomes.
Yeah.
And at Edelman, we would say there are 4 key outcomes. 1, increased trust, and we obviously publish the trust barometer annually. 2, building deeper communities. 3, driving behavioural change with citizens or consumers or businesses. And 4, ultimately commercial success. And I think that the industry, so the modernisation question, has to move towards those outcomes. I don't think that's a funding issue. I think it's a philosophical issue.
Well, the emphasis on outcomes versus outputs has definitely got serious ramifications for the measurement and evaluation industry. The CIPR is working closely with AMEC, and I think I'm right in saying that next week the CIPR will update its measurement and evaluation guidelines, and the social media measurement group will be contributing to that further come the end of January next year.
Well, you chair the panel, so you know what you're doing.
I guess that's my deadline,
right,
yes.
Yeah, so good. We've got a tweet here from Pickled Joe. We're watching from a hotel room in Italy. No question, but isn't technology wonderful? Yes, it is. It absolutely is. PR Week Awards last night. Was it a good night for you?
Was it a good night for me? Apparently,
well, you don't look too jaded.
I haven't seen today's issue of PR Week. I'm apparently told that Edelman was sulking in the red bar afterwards.
No.
Which is ridiculous. We actually retired.
Best Consultancy 2009.
We actually retired to the red bar to have a civilised conversation with clients and friends, and we're joined by many. So was it a good night? I'm very glad. Congratulations to the winners. It's great to see smaller agencies win. I think there's an issue to be addressed about how you compare apples and pears in some of the categories. And it's always great to see the young upcoming talent really passionate about the industry, because it's an industry that otherwise would be full of old jaded people, which would be very bad.
Ben Matthews, you're on Ben Matthews' panel. He won an award
yeah,
last
well,
night.
I was about to say
fantastic.
actually on Ben Matthews, I stood up and tried to start a standing ovation, which I singly failed. That may have been due to the fact that our table was towards the back and nobody saw us standing up. But I think Ben is an exceptional talent. I think what he's trying to achieve with Bright One deserves as much oxygen and publicity as possible. I think it's truly awesome.
You talked about the young talent coming into the industry, and if you think about the triumvirate of knowledge, skills and values, what makes a future Edelman consultant? What are you looking for?
Well, I think to your earlier point, I think everyone has to be digitally native. That doesn't mean that we only...
Well, and a participant.
Sorry, and absolutely a participant. And I think we within this sort of whole evolution of public relations to public engagement have identified, as well as those 4 outcomes, some 7 behaviours. And just some of those behaviours I think have to be inherent within the public relations or public engagement profession of the future. First, they've got to be able to listen with new intelligence. I think listening is a really important skill, and different type of skill when it looks at crowd listening in particular that we have to acquire and have. Secondly, we really have to participate, to your point, really participate in the conversation. It has to be in real time and it has to be all the time. Again, to your previous point about advertising, there's this sort of strangely false construct where you only had to sort of broadcast for 6 weeks in the run-up to like the holiday period and then come on air for a brand or a communications refresh. It's like, hello, we live our lives 24/7, 365, more so than ever before. So listening skills, participation skills, content skills, really important. They're going to have to understand, to my point earlier, you can't spin. It's got to be, you've got to be transparent, you've got to be open, you've got to be authentic, and you've got to be able to build partnerships.
Well, I've just been told we've got 60 seconds left, and I wondered if in that time you might give us your career highlight and your career lowlight to date.
My career highlight, well, obviously...
It's got to be Wonderbra, right?
Well, I was about to say...
Is it Wonderbra?
Was that a highlight?
No, it's mine.
I think meeting Jackie Cooper back in 1987 was the highlight, and we set upon a journey that still sort of is a great adventure to this day, and I couldn't have achieved what I achieved over that period of time without Jackie as my business partner. My low light, I think every time I lose a pitch, it's a low light. I'm a very sore loser.
Fantastic.
Oh, great way to end.
Well, thank you very much. I'm being told we are out of time, so I'm afraid it's time to say goodbye. Before we do go, there's just time to say that we're planning to bring you a first in CIPR history. At 4:30 p.m. on the 26th of October next week, we'll have a live debate between the 2 candidates for the role of CIPR President for 2012, the President-elect obviously for 2011. Rob Brown, Managing Director of Staniforth, and Sally Sykes, Communications Director at the Health and Safety Executive, will join me here in the studio for a special 30-minute show to discuss their vision for the CIPR and the future of the PR industry. So do please join us and send in your questions now to our normal email address, ciprtv@cipr.co.uk, and continue to Twitter, of course. We monitor #CIPR TV. I hope to see you then.
And for now, thanks to Robert, the production team at Marketeers 4DC, and you for your questions and for watching. Goodbye.